I've already started recording. You know what's funny? I realized, was this the class where the screen was turning yellow on us? No?
No.
Well, the old cord that I have, the monitor cable, the VGA cable, I'm really close to the lens right now. It's going to appear on the video that way. The old VGA cable I had, for some reason, something was going on with the connections and it was causing the image to come up yellow. I guess it was eliminating, I don't know, what two colors come together to make like a bright yellow. I guess it was for some reason eliminating red and blue almost entirely, or like only doing part of it, and so it was just giving me yellow. No, red and green make yellow, don't they? I have no idea. I don't know how colors work.
Green and blue.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know.
Maybe, because blue and yellow make green.
Because it's made of RGB.
No, yellow's a primary color.
Yeah, yellow's a primary color. You can't make
red.
yellow.
Yes and no.
RBG.
Goodness. RGB designation for yellow.
Yeah, yellow's a primary color.
Yellow is FFF00 RGB, so it's got red and green and no blue. So red and green combine to make yellow, at least in the light spectrum.
Okay.
So when you have red and green are full on, yellow exists. Which might sound weird, but nonetheless is scientifically true.
Science show piano.
And 1302 is the class that we're in. And we'll go over here to the assignments page where I have, or I guess we should go down here first and talk about what's coming up. That way you're sort of aware. So we have the conferences that we just got done with, and then we have continued discussing week 7 readings today. So it's really just the tiger for us. But I'll probably try to finish talking about the research paper and how to like submit a planning assignment before we move on to the, last poem. And then next week, the discussion readings are Dickinson, who is a lot less, but there's a bunch of them to read, and the one you cannot write about is Faith is a Fine Invention, mostly because people get it wrong usually, and it's so short that people think they can do it, and then it's like 4 lines long, and then when they do it, they always get the content wrong. They're like, this reminds me of how I have strong faith in God, and I'm like, well, that's literally kind of the opposite of what the poem's about.
We should talk about that next. But we're gonna, because I know we were not supposed.
There's nothing wrong with reading ahead.
I know. It was an interesting thing to read because some people may see it as talking about faith, but I was like, no, it's saying faith, quote on faith, is a fine invention.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But you cannot write about it because it's so devious that it looks like it might be one thing and it's something the opposite. So there's Dickinson, which we will have to cover over the course of a day and a half probably, and then Frost will be kind of similar. He'll be over the course of like a day and a half. It's looking very possible that I'll be gone from class on one day of week 11. I don't know which one yet. I think probably the Wednesday for you guys.
Cool.
But I don't know what the alternative arrangements will be because they're going to want me to have some. And I'll just have to let you know what those are when I come up with them. Oh crap, I don't have anything connected on the... Well, I guess I didn't have audio connected ever in the first place, so it doesn't really matter. No, I can't cancel class. It's not an option. I can cancel class when I'm sick, but I won't be sick. I already know I'm going to be gone, so it's different. So what I'm going to do today is just continue talking about how to search for the research topic, because I think we kind of got that started, but not really like how to submit the whole planning or what the planning necessarily needs to contain. We didn't get that far, did we? Yeah, I didn't think we did. I think about as far as we got was me showing you, let's see, the assignments page here. And then we go to, and I've already had the evaluation census link come up, so you can submit the poetry essay whenever you're ready. I mean, I probably won't grade it this weekend, but most people haven't. I wouldn't feel bad about it. But I think that mostly what we talked about was just coming up with the idea, because that's the vast majority of the difficulty in the assignment. And like I had said, it's probably a good idea to do some searching first to figure out what you can search for. Since we're talking about a poem that nobody can use anyway, I'm going to go ahead and look up another example. So I'm going to go here to the databases, and I don't know if I use this example for you guys, but you really must use the databases for the academic journal articles on the literature, and you have to use the ones that I tell you about. So quick links, library services, databases off campus, academic search complete. That's how you get to the database that takes you to literature, scholarly peer review journals. You can Google this database, but that won't work. If you Google the database, you won't be able to get in. Googling is the equivalent of showing up to your friend's house when they're not home. You can't get in their house.
You actually can.
Well, yeah, of course you can. You can get lockpicks online. You can watch the lockpicking lawyers YouTube channel and then, go through the window, any kind of it. You can't go through legally, let's say. Let's say it's
Well, unless they accidentally leave a window unlocked.
it's the freaking Avengers facility. You can't get in unless you're Ant-Man, okay?
Okay.
So, the databases, if you have to go to the main website, because when you do that, it's essentially like having your friend inside the house with a key who lets you in. Like PJC is your friend inside the house and says, "Come on in and look at our research." But if you try to go through Google, it just doesn't work. So if I go here, I'm probably going to. I think I had this. I may have had this as an example. I don't think I opened it for you guys yet, but I'm going to show you kind of a document that I had going one time when I was doing this. I think I have it here. Sample, searching, areas. Okay, favorite stories and my knowledge of them. So I basically had a document going where, and this is different stories than you'll have this semester, but my suggestion would be doing something kind of like this. So if you'll all direct your attention to the screen. I had in this one class, I had Killings by a guy named Abuse, Good Man Is Hard to Find by O'Connor, Barn Burning by Faulkner, Battle Royal, and then I had to play Oedipus the King, but it was really long. I wasn't sure I wanted to do that one. But I just wrote down my 4 favorites, and I said, okay, well, I'll write down what I know about it. Maybe if I can come up with what a theme is, that way I kind of know a direction I could go, because I don't really know what my world issue would be yet. And it's just sort of kind of like writing down what you know and then combining what you know to maybe come up with something. And in this case, I would probably have this in front of me. And while I'm looking at this, saying, okay, well, this is a man kills the killer of his son, thinking vengeance will can make him feel better, but it just gives him more problems. He gets vengeance, it just makes things worse.
Never ends well.
Yeah, it always really works great in westerns, but it doesn't really work in real life. Yeah, just you end up feeling guilty about things. So I will search for, and every author is going to have their own problems. And this guy, though we don't have him anymore, is a great case study for why. If I search for Killings, what I end up finding is, did I hit enter? Bless you. 43,000 articles. Oh gosh. Even if I limit to scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles, how lovely. I'm still down at 22,000. But what am I getting mostly? Honor killings and homicides. Homicides. Okay, so it's looking for the wrong term. I'm looking for a story called Killings. So maybe if I write Killings, Abuse, that's the name of the author. No results were found. Oh crap. Okay, so maybe, and it's a short story. And when I look up Andre Debus online, I go to the website and I say Andre Debus. There he is. And I say Killings. Make sure I've got the right author. Killings, yes, Andre Debus, Killings. Okay, got it. That's him. So I find out he was a short story writer, and that's really mostly what he wrote. Not really that well known. So I probably am not going to find an article just on Killings no matter what. if that does happen to you, and it may happen with the story you choose. By the way, if you plan on choosing Paper Menagerie or what was the other one? No. Paper Menagerie or Tobias Wolff's Rich Brother. If you end up wanting to do either one of those, you'll have to ask me.
I forgot about Rich Brother.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
You'll have to probably end up searching for the author, and in Ken Liu's case, you still won't find anything. You'll end up having to have me give you an article to use, and you may think that would be easier, but it's not. It's not easier to have me give you an article because it's an article on Asian American literature in general, and so you've got to search and hunt and peck through that article to find things that could apply to your paper. So if that is the case, that's what you'll have to do. So my apologies for you. And then if I search Andre Dubus here, so right, I should be able to search Andre Dubus because I can find stuff on just the author if I can't find stuff on the story. Because if I can still find information that is about the author that might still apply. In this case, I know if I search scholarly peer-reviewed academic journals on Dubus, I get some results, but I need to get rid of book reviews, which makes up half of what I have, more so. And I look at this, and when I go here and I look, it's one of his short stories. That won't work. I go here. This is an article about him, so that's good. This is one about him. This is one about him. So good. These are all kind of about him and his stories, and maybe I can find something. Ritual and reenactment, like that's not really going to work, but maybe like heroism because it's a story about revenge. Maybe that'll apply, and I can write it. And before I had to click scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles, I ended up getting a lot of, maybe it was book reviews. Yeah, this particular one, it says Andre Dubus III. Beneath is actually not even a story by him. It's a story by his son, who he just happened to name the exact same thing. Does he not realize as an author he shouldn't have done that? This is going to make it confusing people trying to search for him. And his son also became an author?
Why would you do that if you knew your dad was an author?
No, family business, I guess. So he became an author. But that's not going to happen in every single case. In the case where like you search for Paper Menagerie, you're not going to find anything, and you search for Ken Liu, you're also not going to find anything. You're going to keep searching and searching and come to 19 results. You realize, well, I need to just find academic journal articles, which I have, but everything I look at is either an image or a poem or a story or by some guy named Ken Liu that has something to do with endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. And that's not going to help me at all. So I can't use that even a little bit. Because I don't really need to write a paper about appendicitis. I just don't. Interestingly, that very well could be the same author because I could have sworn he maybe has a medical degree too. I don't remember. Maybe I'm thinking of a different guy. So I will have to email Nichols and say, Nichols, what's that article that I have to have? And then I would give it to you. And then you have to find more articles on your real world issue as a result. But you probably could go through here and I could say, okay, so when I looked for articles, I found on killings, there were like 3 usable articles. And just having a tally going of all the ones that you've got. And so you can keep a tally for each one, and I don't know how many there are going to be but my guess would be something like, at least 23 for Good Man Is Hard to Find. Barn Burning, probably 13. Battle Royal's going to not be Battle Royal, it's going to be Invisible Man. And that's going to be probably at least 34. And Oedipus the King I'll probably skip out on because I had plenty with my stories, and that was what I was worried about. So that is the stories. And what I try to do, what I have underneath each one of these is trying to boil down my story to at least one of its essences, one of its thesis ideas. So in this case, I'm really trying to, remember I told you the human problem is where you want to kind of end up? The human problem that connects the real world issue with its story. In the sample paper, that real world problem, or that human problem is hypocrisy. Because the Westboro Baptist Church, did I get that far and talk to you about that?
Mm-hmm.
I did for you guys, but not for Callie. You may have gone to I think you went to the restroom last time, for real quick. But the Westboro Baptist Church, like they were holding up the signs that said like God hates fags.
Oh, you did talk about that.
Yeah. And they were being like real hypocritical though, because they were holding up these like signs that essentially expressed hate.
Which God hates.
Yeah, which God probably would not approve of because it's not it's one thing to have a sentiment. It's another thing to go loudly yell at someone's funeral when they're trying to have a peaceful goodbye with their family member. that seems kind of counterproductive. But the story too had a bunch of people in that town that were being rather disrespectful to a figure who was trying to take things seriously, the preacher, that they felt more of a need to talk about and judge. Kind of like the people were in the Westbrook Baptist Church. They were just judging everybody around them. So there's hypocrisy there in both cases. So if I find man kills killer of his son thinking vengeance will make him feel better, but it just gave him more problems, I might look at this scenario and say, okay, well, the real key idea here is the idea of vengeance and what the story says about vengeance. And if I can think of a scenario in the real world that involves vengeance, I can then examine in what way it covers vengeance and see if that could be applicable to my story. Because my story says vengeance bad. Like, let's just get to like the most guttural caveman version. Vengeance bad. Vengeance make feel bad later. Then I can kind of say, okay, I need to find another scenario where somebody's trying to get vengeance on somebody, but it's got to be something that's a problem in the world today that's going on. We don't really know what's going on with it. We're trying to solve it. In fact, I can think of two counter-political examples that I think would kind of work perfectly here. So we look at vengeance and sort of like what vengeance is. It's getting back at somebody. So if we look at the example of, say, and I don't know how successful it's been. I'm not an economist. I'm not good at the economics portion of the business portion of politics. But let's assume for the moment, you'd have to look in this to know. And it's probably not what I'm saying, but I'm just using an example. Let's say that you looked into the economics of like what's been happening with like the tariffs. And like, Trump says, I'm going to put tariffs on this country. And so he puts tariffs on them, and they put tariffs on him. And he, out of anger, to get kind of a vengeance, puts more tariffs on them. And it ends up being this sort of vengeance that just goes back and forth, that never seems to ever get solved because everybody's just too busy getting vengeance on each other. It doesn't make things better. It seems to actually make things worse. If that is actually the case and that's what's happening and it ends up causing economic problems in the future or like a recession, in fact, it doesn't necessarily even matter if it does cause a recession. If there are economists who are pointing out problems with what is happening that could indicate a recession, like I think that there was...
But can't everyone find a problem with something? Anything?
Yeah, I'm sure you could find a problem with something.
Yeah.
Like there are some people, I think it was, I don't remember what journal it was, but it wasn't a journal, it was actually a newspaper. There's some indicator of a future recession that usually comes in about 2 years after certain events. And they did like their recession calculator and saw that a recession is likely to occur in like 2 years. Because of something happening. I think it was like the government downgraded its long-term stocks or long-term bonds or something like that. And that's usually an indicator of future recessions, I think. So that tells me maybe there might be a recession coming, so that this vengeance plot isn't necessarily going to work out. So I might be able to then relate the killings thing, which is about a dad getting vengeance for his son's killer by killing the son's killer. And that doesn't really help, but actually makes things worse. I could then apply that to this vast political economic idea where one country is essentially trying to get vengeance against another country for doing something. And it becomes like this weird sort of terrible vengeance loop that will end up just resulting in the heartbreak of really both parties. Because, that actually is how it works in the story as well, is that this one guy is dating this woman, but the woman is technically still married, and her husband finds him dating, but he knows they're dating because they were separated. But he walks in, sees him, doesn't like it, shoots him in the head. And so the dad doesn't like that, the dad of the son, so he goes and kills that guy.
Oh my gosh, it's a killing spree.
Yeah, it's like a kill back and forth kind of thing. But that's sort of how the tariffs would work. Is somebody says, well, we're going to raise tariffs on this, and we're going to raise tariffs on that, and then we raise tariffs on this, and then that. And then somebody's going to get it a little bit better, but it's going to be hard on some parts of the industry somewhere. I thought it was such an odd decision. Well, we won't do it that. Now, that's one way of the vengeance plot working. But let's say that we go the other direction. let's say we go to what area would be vengeance? I know there's got to be something they're getting back at him for specifically. But let's say the Democrats deciding to impeach, or at least open impeachment inquiries. That is likely the result of something that Trump did specifically to the Democrats over time. And so they haven't liked the decisions that he's made. I mean, shoot, they could be doing it for. He's enacted some economic or ICE policies that specifically have affected liberal strongholds, like I think California. Like there was something he did that like really affected California specifically, and there are like a lot of Democrats there. So that the idea is if things get bad in California, then you create more Republicans, because where things go badly, people tend to revolt against their political system. And so it seems as though maybe the Democrats might be doing this vengeance thing by enacting impeachment. Or you could say that Pelosi, at least for a long time, when she was unwilling to act on impeachment, she was aware of the possibility of the problems of vengeance. Like if you approach this from a vengeance standpoint, like you beat Hillary in the election, therefore we want to impeach you. Like it's just not a good enough reason. And she realized that, and she said we can't open impeachment inquiries until we have something impeachable. And it's going to have to be a lot better than the last impeachment that happened to the president, which was over, what was it?
It wasn't that like
was it abusing his office? Like I was never really unsure exactly. What is it?
Was it Watergate?
Watergate?
No, it was Monica Lewinsky.
Oh, no. Bill?
Yeah, Bill Clinton. But the question was, I always wondered, like, it was an impeachment inquiry over it. He was being but I never could figure out why. Like, what exactly was it just abusing the power he had of office?
The way they thought of it was that he had used his power to get what he had wanted with the intern.
So I guess it was just,
And
it was,
part of the reason it.
conduct unbefitting a president.
And then they had a hearing about it, and then he didn't tell the truth, and so that was another point that they used.
That also is an interesting concept, though, because that's sort of like the idea of entrapment in a way, where like you put somebody in the stand and ask them very specific personal questions that could damage them.
I mean, that happens all the time.
And then I mean, he's a president, so he doesn't necessarily plead the fifth. I mean, it's just an inquiry. I've always had a problem with the idea of entrapment, like those adult cops who go online and say they're 16-year-old girls, and then they get these very lonely dudes to say like, "Oh, somebody likes me," and then like I just feel so bad. Like
Yeah, but if
like 35-year-old socially awkward dudes who are sitting at home and have never had anybody express any interest in them, and somebody says, "Hey, I'm a girl who thinks you're handsome."
13-year-old girl is okay person.
I mean, what does a human resort to when they have no human contact? I don't know. I feel like I've always I don't think it's okay what the guys do. I just don't think it's fair to approach them with a situation that's not real, because these are guys who likely would never end up having to deal with that anyway. They weren't seeking out girls online. Somebody sought them out.
Right?
So they were like an awkward 35-year-old guy, and what usually happens to those people, sadly, they probably just end up living the rest of their lives alone. And
Actually true. Most of the time, the people that say contact
Yeah.
have already looked up something.
Well, now if that's the case, that's okay.
Yeah, most of the time that is the case.
Yeah, if that is the case, I'm cool with
they've
that.
already looked up
Because
something
essentially they're
that-
trying to find something that is, I guess, impeachable, like incriminating, something they can do that's incriminating beyond just. But the question is, how do they get the information in the first place? You can't look at people's private internet history for no reason.
You have to have public cause.
Yeah, I would think. But I don't know. But if it's just somebody who's entrapping people who haven't actually done anything, nor have they sought out, contacted people, I don't know. It's always kind of bothered me. A little different in the Bill Clinton scenario because he literally did do it. But yeah, it's weird scenarios there. So at the vengeance plot, I could say that like maybe either Nancy Pelosi kind of saw it coming and she did not want to seek vengeance just for the sake of seeking vengeance. Or even now you could say that this is still too early, or maybe she was just waiting for the moment where it would have the greatest effect on the election. And this is merely supposed to be like vengeance for all of, I mean, part of me thinks that the Democratic House is just holding on to all these bills that they've literally passed a ton of them, and they go to the Senate and nothing happens. So they're just holding on to it. They're just wait. And then if Trump gets impeached and the election goes bad, then like literally like day one of the Democratic-controlled House and Senate will be like pass 170 bills that they couldn't pass in the old sessions, and they'll just run them through with a majority. Which it's going to be very hard to get a supermajority in the Senate. Oh wait, but Mitch McConnell changed the rules, didn't he? So it's now simple majority. Well, wasn't that also playing off a rule that happened in the Obama administration too? So it's like, it was.
They can make their own rules. Like the rules that were made by the Senate already.
Yeah.
So they're allowed to change the rule.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in any circumstance for any of those, they can just, as long as they vote on it, they can change the rule.
Interesting. But vengeance as a way of approaching seems not to work. So vengeance in either of those scenarios, like, raising tariffs indefinitely or just bring impeachment because you're angry at the person who has affected you in some other political arena, neither one of those will probably end up working out well for the parties who are seeking the vengeance. And I think that I like those the best because if you look at that, they're not the same. Like if I go out and I find, okay, well, where's a story somewhere about a person who seeks vengeance and kills somebody? Oh, look, a guy murdered somebody somewhere. Like, I don't know, that's not a big issue to me. And like, isolated murders aren't big issues. I could do it for a school shooting, but again, those people aren't the norm. Those don't happen daily. But the political decisions that happen affect vast numbers of people, and it's a vengeance plot that affects a huge swath of people, not one that is technically statistically irrelevant, like a school shooting and hard to predict. Or at least currently with what we know of sociology and psychology, it's hard to predict. And then if I look at good man, it's hard to find. We're looking at selfishness. If I look at barn burning, we're looking at kind of loyalty. Doing what's right. And in battle royal, there's a lot of different things going on here. Being a sellout, I guess, is kind of the last image we see is he's worried he's become a sellout for his entire race. He's become, like, I think it's a minor way of looking at it. I think he's become like an Uncle Tom is the phrase, I think, where essentially you sell out your race for some benefits to yourself. And I boil each one of those down to that human issue, and then I go search for real-world issues that might have elements of this. And my suggestion is when you go do that is not to go to the Academic Search Complete database for just finding out what a real-world issue might be, but to go to the other one, which is the... Yes, not for the research paper, but for like the news articles. And this is just, at this point, I'm not using any articles from this database. I'm just going here to find topics, possible topics. And I will go to browse issues, and I'll write down things that are interesting to me. So I'm just going to scroll. There's a huge list now, and it's got a lot of interesting stuff. Maybe I have areas that I really like, but I've never thought about, like, what does it actually contain? Like nanotech, like what's a world issue with nanotech right now? What's the problem there? And I look, you're never supposed to use these articles, so don't use these articles, but you can look at like viewpoint articles and see like what some of the controversies are surrounding nanotech right now. We need stronger regulation for safety purposes, or Asian nanotech is starting to surpass that of the West, so we could look at what that could do. But regardless, I'm just probably right now going to write down broad topics by scrolling through. And then I'll have like another kind of file going here called like areas of interest from opposing viewpoints. And so I'm writing down the ones that are really kind of cool to me, and I'm bolding the ones that are interesting. And let's say like I'm really into artificial intelligence. In fact, I'm going to add one because I saw it today. It's really something I saw really interests me. Genetic testing. Let's do a capital A. Medical marijuana, which while I find it somewhat interesting, I don't really care that much. Minimum wage. Black Lives Matter. That's the one I like. I'm interested in that Child labor, it doesn't really affect me directly though, so I have less of an interest in it. Trump, I'm not super interested in that one right now. Same-sex marriage, it's already kind of so established, like it doesn't really even matter anymore. Obama, he's out.
Oh, no, he's not.
Capitalism. In fact, well, we could add one to the list because real big right now is like we'll talk about socialism and in fact, we can make that a bold one for me because that one's one that it's just like the word feminism. People just don't understand the concept. I think a lot of people. But I never asked that question. Like, who in the room is a feminist?
Not a New Day feminist. Cause
What do you
They
mean,
think
New
that
Day
women should be
feminist?
treated better, not-
Are you a feminist?
They've changed what actual feminism is.
They can't change it. It is what it is.
No, they've made it to where they want women to be
Yeah.
treated
You
better than
can't.
men. So
They
no,
can't
no,
change it.
They changed it.
But that's a new term. So, okay, the theory of the political.
Regular feminism is just like wanting men and women to be treated equally. Then I'm that.
Yeah, that's
I'm that.
basically.
Yes, the theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes.
Then yes.
Then yeah, I'm one of those.
However,
Extremists.
people
There you go.
confuse it with the term, like, they think it's misogyny, but the opposite is what feminism is, but it's not. Feminism is equality. The opposite of misogyny is misandry. And so nobody in the room is a misandrist or a misogynist, I hope, because that means you assume that men and women are, one is superior to the other. I think the same thing sort of happens with socialism, because if you look at the word socialism, you could talk about it as the little L socialism, you could talk about it as big L, or not big, little L, big S socialism or little s socialism. So big S socialism is talking about as a theoretical economic construct where workers control the means of production. And I think that would be essentially given to them by the government. So that, and if workers control it, essentially means that since the workers vote the government and the government controls it. And now in communism, that's a step further too, where I think that they literally control the rationing of goods. I'm not 100% sure on that. But socialism can also be little s socialism, which is like social policies. But it generally does still involve some measure of social control of certain areas that are considered those like inalienable rights, like the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And those three words kind of cause us a lot of problems, I guess, in politics, because we essentially we say like everyone has the right to life, the right to pursuit of happiness. Wait, hold on. I'm getting confused thinking about the wording. I need to look up.
Is it life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness?
Oh yes, everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And there are people who argue that if economically we have the means to provide it through taxes, everybody should have the right to life through some sort of universal health care. Some people argue it that way. Some people say, well, but that impedes on somebody else's right to happiness. Or so it's basically like to what degree and how do we define these three words in the context of like how I see the way things work. So that ends up kind of causing some discrepancies there. Weirdly enough, nobody seems to really argue about things like we need firefighters and policemen. Like everybody seems to agree on that one. Like, yeah, somebody's got to keep the peace. It'd be sucky to have like police insurance where you're like a gold tier member. You're like, well, you get like 2-minute response time. And you're like, but if you just pay for like the base, you're like 8-minute response time. Like, well, sorry, we had a gold member call, so we're gonna need to go to them first. Their fire is not as strong, but they have a better plan. So we're gonna go do this right. But I think a lot of people are misusing the word socialism lately. It's just basically any concept they don't like about liberals or Democrats, that's socialism. Like universal health care, that's socialism, which kind of closely is socialism. But if you say like, gay marriage, that's just socialism. Like, well, really that one. Like you can't just.
But, all right.
Yeah, there's no real economics involved in gay marriage. I mean, there are, but so that's one of those terms that gets kind of misused, like feminism is people just because it has an ism on the end, they start using it as like a curse word for everything they don't like. Yeah, it's like it's isming. What did you say?
What?
I call it isming. What did you say?
I didn't say anything.
You said something. You said. I just couldn't make out what it was. Okay.
It probably wasn't important.
So then I'll take a look at this list, and I'll compare it over here to this other list I have of stories, and I'll see, okay, are there any of these areas where I can see vengeance? And I look at artificial intelligence, abortion, genetic testing. Weirdly enough, my most interested area, probably of the two, is actually genetic testing and artificial intelligence, because I have a huge predilection for technology and its effects on society. I love thinking about possibilities like that, even if they're terrifying. In fact, I've gone and thought about, I do think that vaccinations are helpful to society, but people, almost everybody who's talking about vaccinations, whether they're helpful or harmful, is talking about it in the short term. I'm wondering, after seeing like this genetic testing story that I saw the other day, if did I actually write this down? Let me see. I really hope that I did. I just didn't forget about it. Let me see if I go to my iCloud and I search genetic. Yes, a new CRISPR technique could fix almost all genetic diseases, including sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, and 175 more heritable human disorders. And I haven't read the article yet. It's merely a title I sent to myself with the article attached so that I could read it later at my leisure. And I could look this up, and it says that's a less error-prone DNA editing method that could correct many more harmful mutations than was previously possible. Because I guess it's just more, what do you call it? It's a more sure method, a certain method. Huh? Precise, yeah, precise. And then they've got this long story and like giving me like some sob story about some dude, which I don't really care about that. What? Oh, my wife texted me something. I remember texting her, and she texted me back, and I didn't recall. I was like, why did she text me this? But like, I thought about something with vaccinations. By looking at the CRISPR technique, I was like thinking to myself, actually, is it possible that it's important to our species to have certain things like sickle cell anemia and cystic fibrosis in the gene pool? And if at some point, for some reason, it becomes better for our species to have whatever problems are inherent there, like, let's say that we could eliminate something like ADHD. But what if we find out that ADHD is actually an expression of like somehow creative thought, and people's ability, like trying to stop ADHD is actually suppressing like creative thought, 'cause it's like an inability to focus, but that means you're also jumping around to other topics constantly. But that might be a preferred method of thinking later in society. It might actually help. So if you try to suppress that now through somehow figuring out how to get rid of it with genetic testing, somebody says, well, we don't want people who can't focus. What if that lack of focus provides another benefit? And a lot of, I think, the famous people they've determined probably had ADHD, I think, some of them. But things like cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia may serve a function in the gene pool that we just might not know what it is. And there's some people who wanted to like eliminate blindness from like a kid, but there were blind parents who wanted to have a blind kid, and they said, can we force that into the genes? They're like, that's not right.
Why would you do that?
Well, it's weird that you say that, because like, okay, do you think that it's like a person who is blind is any lesser of a person than a person who is not blind?
No.
No, nobody thinks that, right?
But
So
why
that
would
to be
you want
born,
that
so
for
a
your
person
kid?
who's born blind is just as equal as somebody who's born with sight, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's somebody who's a blind parent, and they have another blind parent, and they're both blind, and they want to have a blind child because it's going to be more convenient for them to raise the child that way.
Oh, okay. I see
Then
what
they
you mean.
could do that. But then when you say that, people start getting really kind of weirded out. They're like, oh, but the kid doesn't have a choice to be born blind.
See, but I misconstrued that a little bit because I thought you were saying like, just there were these normal two parents who just
Yeah.
wanted to have a blind kid, and I was like, but that's not fair to the kid because they never get like but I kind of see
But having
if
the
both
ability
parents
to
are
actually
blind.
see, I mean, there's so much more you can do. The kid can drive the parent. The kid can be a caretaker for the parents later.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Why would you want?
But
to
then
make your
again,
kid-
why?
But then when you
Fair to the
but
kid.
then by having those thoughts too, we sort of admit something that we don't like to admit, which is that we think that
helpless?
the
It's
sighted
our
person's
benefit.
experience is superior to the blind person's experience, so that a sighted life is better than a blind life. That's sort of what we are saying when we say those sorts of things. Like you're able to do more things if you can do this.
Well, considering that I don't think any of us in this room are blind, we can't say from what experience from that area. Like, we can't say, well, our experiences are only from what we know as our own lives. We can never say, oh, well, I know exactly how a blind person feels because we're not blind.
And we don't know what degree in the future, and this is what I'm kind of stuck about the genetic testing, where if you get rid of all these elements, like, what if we do have and this is not going to happen. What if we do have a situation pop up like the Sandra Bullock movie on Netflix, where suddenly, if you're blind, it's very helpful because you can't see the alien thing that kills everybody.
I want to know what they were seeing. I want to know what they were seeing, and it bothers me that I can't.
Well, everyone dies.
I just thought to myself, what would cause somebody to want to kill themselves immediately? Oh gosh, terrible.
I want to know what they saw.
That's just
They saw their own personal life back there.
No, I was thinking like everybody, they saw like their grandmother in a compromising situation. I was like, and I don't want to live anymore. I'm done. I believe that I've lived the extent of my life. And everybody sees that. It'd be horrible.
I want to know. It just bothers me.
Everybody essentially sees the Oedipus story lived out in their own family.
See your dad mosquito.
What?
Oh, that'd be worse.
Mosquito.
Oh, I thought you said your dad's mosquito. I was like, what is a mosquito? And I was like,
He has a pet mosquito named
I saw
Charles.
this very big guy
with a
wearing
mosquito. And then they jumped off the side of the ship. I was gonna say boat, and then I started to say ship, and I said bip.
I thought you said bitch.
No, I was thinking I said bip, but
The side of.
it felt like I said bip.
I heard two. I heard hers.
Yeah.
Oh, well, my bad. I wasn't trying to say. I don't think I have to mark that out because I didn't think I wasn't trying to say a bad word
Like, how do you jump off the side?
of a ship.
Well, it's a long time and finesse.
Finesse. But I think the idea here with all of those, like, we don't know to what degree in the future some of these changes we're making now will have longitudinal effects on humanity. Like, we think that all the scientific changes we're making now, yes, we know how to make these changes now, but what are the long-term effects of these changes? And yes, vaccinations, they do things like they get rid of polio, they get rid of measles, but is it good for our species to have measles gone in the long term? I don't really know. I mean, does that sort of, having measles and getting measles, does those sorts of shocks to the human element, do those breed new genetic reactions, adaptations, or there are new expressions of genes under...
That's my favorite.
I don't know. Like, I mean, as things are put under pressure, do they then develop defenses? So if you have enough people get measles, and then enough people like develop a genetic thing that helps counteract that, does that then you could get enough people who have had that adaptation form, they start mating, that genetic abnormality comes up and actually helps the species. I don't know, but it's interesting to me. And so if I look at killings, which I want to use something y'all can't possibly use. Interestingly, I look at the vengeance idea, and I look at artificial intelligence, and it's something that's been very interesting to me lately because of its implications. Mostly, I'm interested in for stuff like this. I may have already shown you this. Have I shown you the Jim Carrey video?
No.
Okay. So,
Can you?
actually, yeah, I can actually.
It's like, I don't
There
know.
might be a little bit of cursing in there. I can't recall, but I don't think that there is in this one. I mean, there might be.
Doesn't really matter though.
Yes, it does. I don't want to over curse the room out. It wouldn't be me cursing the room out. It'd be the
Jim Carrey.
video, but yeah, Jim Carrey. No, not that. It's gonna be in Dropbox. Yeah, Dropbox. And then I go down to the end, and I go to deepfakes. There we go. This is something that's been new, that's been happening lately. Are these things called deepfakes? So I don't think I have the sound hooked up. So it's not a big deal that the sound's not hooked up. But this is The Shining. I'll have the sound up. We're at Halloween, so it's appropriate. In fact, I might go flip the lights off so nobody else is near the lights, but you can see it better. So this is something that a lot of people have not known is going on. These kinds of things. This video actually has inserted Jim Carrey. Yes. This is an artificial intelligence idea.
How's it going?
Now they still have Jack Nicholson's voice
You
in
lot
there.
ready today?
Yes.
Hey, weather forecast said it's gonna snow tonight.
What do you want me to do about it?
Oh, come on, Hunt. Don't be so grouchy.
I'm not being grouchy. I just want to finish my work.
Weird.
Okay, I understand. I'll come back later on with a couple of sandwiches for you, and maybe you'll let me read something then.
Wendy, let me explain something to you. Whenever you come in here and interrupt me, you're breaking my concentration. You're distracting me. And it will then take me time to get back to where I was.
So
It's so weird.
this is actually done not with millions of dollars of CGI. This was done by a guy on his home computer, and it took about maybe 24 hours to compile and render. Now the data set he had to build, interestingly enough, there's another video where people would ask, like, how do you build these data sets? And this is how the data sets are built. The music, I think, is kind of annoying here, but let's turn the music down. But like, this is essentially, he takes all the movies and it analyzes frame by frame the direction of the face that Jim Carrey has in every frame of every film he's ever been in. And so if you look, it's got like, oh wait, hold on, let me see. So it's got like, if you just kind of scroll through, you can see it's got like every angle of his face from almost every movie he's been in. And he only used ones, I think, from a certain era, so he had him at a certain age. And then it uses all of that to essentially decide, the computer decides what frame, like, how do I use multiple faces to combine to create this angle for this frame in this moment, and it superimposes that onto the face. And it does that over and over and over again, hundreds of thousands of times, until it creates that one single unbroken image of technically what is nothing but a bunch of individual pictures. That's what, you know, films are, is a bunch of individual pictures taken, but it puts it all together at once and makes it look like one unsingle broken thing. Now, when this originally came into the media, the first, I mean, you could probably guess, what do you think the first thing somebody used this for was?
Been a crime?
No. Does anybody happen to know what has driven every single technological advance in media since its inception? You know, like why VHS came to be a thing
Entertain people?
over theaters, and why televisions in the homes became a thing.
Because people are lazy?
No.
I don't know. I'm just guessing over here.
Pornography.
Oh.
I didn't want to say it.
In the movie theaters, people used to have to, if they wanted to go see a pornography film, they had to go to a movie theater with a bunch of other people.
Are you for real?
And yeah, and they would sit and they would watch it, and they were not good places to go. From what I understand, it was just a very awkward, very yucky place to go.
I mean, you know.
But when VHS came out, one of the main drivers of VHS was the pornography industry, because people wanted people to watch these films that they nonetheless wanted to watch in the privacy of their own home without anybody knowing about it. But you still kind of had to order it from a service, and somebody knew it was coming to your house. But eventually the internet came out, right? And then HD cameras and things. But those just increase the detail which you can show people, and they privatize where you can find them. Now it's on the internet, so you don't even have to order anything. There's like websites that are basically like YouTube for that industry. And so one of the first things that came out when somebody figured out how to do this, where you could compile a set of images from publicly available photos and films to create a profile of somebody that could then be used to superimpose their face onto the face of somebody else in another video. The first thing it was used for, I think, at least the first time it came into the media, was they superimposed an actress's face onto a pornography video. So what they did, it was the lady who plays Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, they superimposed her face onto some pornography video, and they basically made it look like she was in it. That's, I think, where you can get into some interesting gray areas of technology and artificial intelligence and some ethical problems and some controversies. And then what I wonder is if this gets even more available, it's even more ubiquitous. You could literally get to a point where there's just an app and you could do this from your phone. Well, you could use that as a sort of method of revenge on exes if it goes unregulated.
Oh my God.
You see what I mean? Like if you have an ex and you just take their publicly available Instagram
And make a porno.
and you essentially like tell it to compile all the data that they've posted to Facebook or social media, all the pictures they've ever posted anywhere. It'll build a profile of their face, and then it'll superimpose it on any video you want to put it on. Then you could use that as sort of a revenge scenario. But you could essentially write the paper where you're taking this idea within artificial intelligence, a very small idea, very up and coming, not something that's a problem yet, but could be. Then you're applying that to the story Killings, where it says, man kills the killer of his son thinking vengeance will make him feel better, but it just gave him more problems. So it would almost be like approaching it in a different way, but like let's say that we have there's really not much we can do in this case for, and see, now I wonder if it would even work, because like if let's say that I do vengeance plot, right? Really the problem person here in this vengeance plot is the guy who gets the vengeance, the dad. He gets revenge on his son's killer. So he's the one who should realize what he should do and how vengeance generally comes with more problems than it solves. Then really, I guess, when you're doing the paper over artificial intelligence and doing that video idea, like we should not allow a society that allows revenge porn to exist. And that already exists as a thing, revenge porn. I don't know if you know that's actually felonious. When I say felonious, I mean, it's a felony. I don't know if you know that already, but like in the state of Texas, I think, and maybe even the United States in its entirety, like if somebody consensually sends you a photograph of themselves in a compromising situation out of trust, and then you later after the breakup, you send that to somebody who they did not consent to have that sent to, or a group of people as sort of like an act of revenge. That actually is now, I believe, a Class C or Class A or B. I don't know how classes work. Felony. So it's now a felony and it's called revenge porn currently. But this would be different. This would be like revenge fake porn. This is somebody who never sent you anything bad, that you turn them into a bad thing that they never even did. And because it's so convincing, and in the future probably will get more so, you may even be able to make it look like the person actually did the thing, to the point that we may even not even have video evidence to be admissible in court anymore. You may only have to have like court documents of like, this person was actually here because we have like their fingerprint, like their credit card was there and they were there. But then because security footage won't be like admissible anymore. But so I don't necessarily know if that would work for my revenge plot thing, even though I kind of would want it to, because the problem is the burden then is put on the government to find regulations to stop it from happening. And I don't think that the idea in that story, when I read that story, is that the town should have had better regulations to stop revenge plots like this from happening. That was not what it was trying to say. So I couldn't probably use that one. But I probably could go to something like, maybe if I wanted to do, let's say, faith is a fine invention, which I can read real quick. So it's real short, and we're going to get to it in the coming weeks anyway. But faith, we're going to run out of time on that. Faith is a fine invention by Emily Dickinson. It's a very short poem, so it's easy to read and understand. This is the whole poem right here, 4 lines. I don't even have to like do my normal thing of getting rid of the top of the screen. So it says, faith is a fine invention for gentlemen who see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. And a lot of students will read this and say, oh, it's saying faith is fine. Faith is fine. But there are a couple things you need to know when reading this poem is that faith is in quotes. So it's saying like, it's almost like when you use quotes and you use the phrase, quotes are not ever really meant to be used to add emphasis. They're supposed to be used to essentially be sarcastic. Like it's like so-called faith and is a fine, and the word she uses here is not idea, but invention. So when she says faith is an invention, it's almost like saying man created faith. Man is the creator of faith, not God has created faith. I mean, you could still think it's that way, but given the nature of the poem and what follows, it doesn't make a lot of sense to think of it as a nice thing to say about faith. So it says faith is a fine invention, something that was come up with for gentlemen who see. So if you can see the nature of a situation and you say, I have, faith that my house will withstand the floodwaters, but secretly that you've built flood protections into your home, so there's no way it's going to get knocked down. You can see that, and so you can have that faith because you can see. Interestingly enough, it sort of flies in the face, and that's I think why she puts it in quotes. She was knowledgeable about the Bible still, even though it sounds like she's kind of being negative here. Like that definition of faith, which is that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, is how it's defined in the Bible. She's saying it's so-called faith because for it to actually work consistently, you have to be able to see. And I think that's kind of what she's saying is the irony of faith, is that it only ever works consistently 100% of the time when you already can see. And so she says in an emergency, though, that microscopes are prudent. So if you're in a situation where, somebody's leg is fallen off because they got, ripped off by a bear, you can't be like, brethren, let's just come and pray over Brother Paul, whose leg has been ripped off by a bear. Because in that case, you don't know what the method is of actually, God's not going to grow his leg back, or you hopefully mean to do. It's just not going to happen. So, we're not quite Jesus where we can be like, dude, don't cut his ear off. There. Silly. It's not what I meant by sword. A little too gung-ho. So, the idea in this case is that she's saying it's fine to have faith when you can already see what the outcome has to be. But in the cases where you're not sure it's an emergency, what do we do? Microscopes are going to be absolutely necessary. And that could be perfectly applied, I think, to the vaccination problem. Where, granted, a lot of people, I think, who are doing vaccine exemptions are religious people. I'm not 100% sure why. I'm assuming the religious people who are doing it is because they say, like, well, having vaccinations is kind of like playing God. Like, if God wants me to be sick, he'll make me sick.
Some people do think that.
Well, the problem with that thinking is not necessarily that if you want to have that religious belief, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the problem is that essentially, in that case, you're forcing – the way that vaccinations work is that you have to have herd immunity. You have to have 93% at least people who have been vaccinated in an area to provide herd immunity to the entire group. And when you drop below that, people start getting sick again. The problem is there are certain people who can't receive vaccinations, like kids who've had, I think who've had sickle cell anemia can't get vaccinations because they can actually make them sick and they can't recover from it. So people who have autoimmune deficiencies, they can't have it. So what it does is when somebody who has a religious exemption decides not to be vaccinated, they're essentially forcing that same choice on the people who can't get vaccinations even if they want them. And that's what herd immunity is, something that we have to do a group for the rest. Is sort of how it functions. So she would probably, Emily Dickinson, have a. This is she wrote this prior to vaccinations, I think, being a thing. It had been thought about. I think Louis Pasteur had been looking at, pasteurization process, but I mean, the world wasn't even ready for Ignaz Semmelweis when I think she was alive, which is the guy who said, "Hey, maybe we should wash our hands and stuff," and he went insane because they didn't believe him. But I think that this would work very well with the problem of vaccinations, and like essentially you say the problem in both is to Emily Dickinson here it looks like a distrust in science, which is a weird thing to have as a poet say is important, is not having a distrust in science. And in the same case as in vaccines as well. I'm a distrust in science. And a belief in faith over evidence, I think, is something she would also have a problem with. So if you apply both of those issues to the real world issue that we have, then you kind of recognize that essentially what she would say in that case is for those who, think God will heal them in any case where they get sick or, God's will be done, that's all well and good, but when we already have something that has documented evidence of having worked, maybe we should use that, Maybe that is, and she's not saying this, but, maybe you could say that is God. God's like, inspired you to come up with vaccinations, boom. Go forth ye and vaccinate.
One who gave us our brains, so.
I always find it funny. I always find it really funny that people who don't vaccinate often will have glasses. I don't want to play God, but I gotta see. Seeing is important.
Yeah, because glasses came from science.
So if I go and I search on the database, I can probably find vaccinations. Right here is a real world issue. I can look at the various viewpoint articles and see what the problems are here. And then I can go over to this database. Now, with any scientific topics, it is possible that you'll end up using opposing viewpoints for perhaps current political issues because it'll have access to news articles. But any scientific issues are probably going to end up being searched in academic search complete because you'll need to find scholarly peer-reviewed academic journal articles whenever you can. Probably won't be able to find that on any kind of Trump-related issue because that's a recent thing. But vaccines, there's going to be plenty of academic journal articles out there on vaccines. So what I would do in this case is I'm going to search. I don't know if it's going to exist in here as a topic. Faith is a fine. There it is right there. Are there articles on it? Initial search did not reveal any results. Now I do have it publication date. I might get rid of the publication date restriction. Oh no, there's actually not one. It's just that's the most recent article that's in this search. So Faith is a Fine Invention has no articles in the database, unfortunately. So maybe I just search for Emily Dickinson, which there should be plenty. And then I've got 277 articles in full text with scholarly peer reviewed. I go down here and I get rid of all the things that aren't academic journals because a lot of them are book reviews that are books about Emily Dickinson. I don't have to restrict for publication date because that's not a big deal. Maybe I'll get lucky and see my poem I'm looking for here in the subjects area. No, it's just other authors. And then I'll read through these articles, titles. There's 174 of them, it's quite a bit. But there's nothing really I can do to limit by subject. And I'll go through these and I'll maybe look for articles that, first of all, I need to look at each one that I look at because I want to make sure that it's not just a poem that she's written that somebody has published elsewhere. I need to make sure it's actually an article about what she has written. So this is like talking about her work in Tan Lin. I don't know who that is, so I can't use that either. So
basically, you're looking for any kind of articles that are specifically about the work you're basing it off.
Yeah, I can't. I'm probably not going to find articles specifically about faith is a fine invention, or I would have been able to find that. But I can find articles about Emily Dickinson where I know if I read that article, I'm going to find information about Emily Dickinson, the way she wrote, the ideas she had that I could apply to what I'm writing. So I'm gonna have to find something that shows like her knowledge of like maybe the sciences and stuff, or her insistence on, being current with what's happening in the world. Language of paradox and the ironic poetry. I mean, that might apply, but I'm still gonna keep looking. Love, terror, and transcendence. I don't know. Blind seeing. Oh, that almost seems like it's hinting at the poem I'm talking about. Blind seeing. So I might click this one and that'll be my article there. I wonder if I search here, if I go to the PDF full text, if I'll get lucky enough that I can then, I bet it's going to be in here if I had to guess. Faith. Actually, I don't think I am. I don't think I'm that lucky. Let's see. How do I make it bigger? Be bigger. In the light of faith, memory, she writes the poem's closed till jealous daylight interrupts. So no, it's never actually talking about that poem. But she is talking about faith in here a little bit, or at least blind seeing and what it is to see. So I can still use some of that information, I think, in the searching. And maybe I can use this article. So what I'm going to do is, I probably should save a copy of this article to my computer, so I'll click the download area and save it. That way you can still work on the stuff at home, having like a USB or something. And then go here to cite. So when I cite, I'm going to scroll down to MLA, because it just gives you the MLA citation, and all you got to do is copy paste it. And I'm going to start like a new document over here. I'm going to call this my works cited. Go over to the left, and I'm going to paste this in.
For the planning, we have to have the articles as well.
You just have to, for the planning, you have to have the article citations at least. That's all you have to have is citations, and I'm going to set my formatting up here to where they look like citations. So I'm going to do hanging into a ½ inch with a double spacing. And then I'm okay there. So I'll then go and find more articles as well, and probably the other articles I need to find will also be on this database in this case, which are going to be ones on the vaccines. I might leave that article open so I can kind of download it later or be able to use it on another tab. So I'm going to open up a link in a new tab and then just go up here and search for vaccinations. And I might actually you can actually use these subject term header things like SU will make sure that that's included as a subject. I'm going to say vaccines, and I'm going to say and subject education. Like, what's the best way to educate people on getting vaccinations? And I've already got it down to like 117 possibilities. And I have scholarly peer-reviewed full text. I can get it down to academic journals, so I'm good there. And then not social, influence of sociodemographic factors in measles, rubella campaign. Okay, so I'm looking for campaign. That's what I want. So I'll open like a new tab. Effectiveness of web-based education program to improve vaccine storage conditions. No. Hepatitis B knowledge, testing, and vaccination history among undergraduate public health students in Ghana. No. Awareness, uptake, and barriers of human papillomavirus vaccine among students of private medical college in Karachi. Can I do United States? I think it'd be too. I don't think I would get lucky enough for that. Estimation of utility weights for human papillomavirus. What is this? Public understanding of science, reframing papilloma vaccine hesitancy. There we go. And I'll keep doing that and doing that. And let's just say that this one works. Let's say that this one works. And I have to have 5 total, and I have 5 total now. So what I'm going to do is just grab the citations. Let's say that these all work. I've looked at them. By the way, these don't all work.
So the 5 total is like both 5 from
There's not 5 for each, it's 5 altogether.
5 altogether?
Yeah. Now, there is one other citation you need to add. I don't know if anybody's looked at the document in enough detail to figure out what that is. Has anybody looked at the assignment packet in enough detail to see what the other citation you also need to provide is?
No.
What is this name? And I have time to keep going. Well, no, still saying. Because what I'm going to do is go down and show you the example here, the sample planning. There's 1 or 2 articles on your literature. There's 3 to 4 on your real-world issue. And then you also have to cite the primary source, which we didn't really have a lot of or really any of in 1301, which is the textbook itself that contains the story. Now, I have faked this one because Hawthorne's story is not actually in Arguing About Literature, but I basically wanted to give you a prepared Arguing About Literature source that you could just more or less copy and paste into your own document and just change. Yeah, this is perfect for our textbook. You just have to change the author names. And then what you'll end up submitting will be this and that. I think I showed you the color-coded thesis, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah. So you got to have the human problem, the real world issue, the literature, what you're saying about them, and roughly what that means. And then when you'll submit it, it'll look like this. You'll have the document with the works cited. You'll call it works cited this time, not references. And your thesis you'll submit in the comments box, so it'll display on the right. So that I should see on the left your works cited, on the right your thesis. And now you can also submit the thesis as part of the document if you just want to be sure. You can see the person down below has their thesis at the bottom. You don't have to do that, but they did. And so you want a grade of a 9 or 10 in order to be able to start working on your paper. If you receive anything 8 or below, you need to redo it until you get a 9 or a 10. And the reason for that is if you multiply that number that I give you times 10, that's about as high as I think you'll go with what I can currently see. So if I give you like a 6, that means I think you could get as high as a 69, or a 3 as high as a 39. But a 9 is as high as a 99. 8 is 89, so that's close, but not quite. So just you'll end up needing to keep. Now, it's not due until next week, but I just want to get you all started if you want to search this weekend. Yeah.
Because I already have a good idea of how I'm doing.